Hello, good morning. It's already brunch without Tiffany. It's Friday. I want to talk to you about violence and accusing people of violence and so forth. So, I think before you accuse somebody, always look at yourself and how you handle things, and also look at situations, and do not judge anyone until you walked in their shoes 3 days. Problem is, people judge so quickly and they feel they're protecting, but actually to defend is not an act of violence. And especially in Israel, we should know this, that if a person is acting in violence and you grab them, that's not an act of violence. And I'd like to say this in context of how people behave in this country, that there's such a lack of limits, psychologically, physically, and in a way sometimes you can misconstrue it and think somebody's your friend, but actually they're not your friend at all, and they can actually use any information you give them against you. And it's not being paranoid, because I used to think my mother is paranoid, but it's actually people are sometimes very envious, and even if they're in a good position, but especially if they're not in a good position, they're very envious of other people, and they just think about how they can harm them. And you have to understand, I realize I'm a very naive person, very trusting, and I realize that you cannot show compassion towards another person without showing compassion towards yourself, first of all. I cannot show compassion towards animals or children or anyone in need unless I am compassionate towards myself. You can't give to others unless you're compassionate towards yourself. So you're in a situation where people don't appreciate you and actually misconstrue everything you do and are suspicious constantly, thinking, why is she doing this and why is she doing that? And not realizing what you're doing, and not understanding and not knowing, and seeing the projection of their own evil, dark heart, which is so often the case. Then you cannot handle things like that except just to say, bail out, say goodbye, I'm leaving. Never stay in a place where you're not appreciated. Never stay in a place where people lie about you and judge your character in a bad way and demonize you. Realize that a lot of people don't live in self-awareness, and they project their own negativity onto others. They're not able to see the darkness within themselves, and everybody has darkness. There's not one person on this earth that is pure. Animals also have a dark side to them, but they're not as evil as human beings, because human beings have all kinds of mechanisms to hide and project their meanness to others. I want to talk about politics in this context. People choose to demonstrate against the prime minister in stupid demonstrations that have no purpose other than, oh, he's going to leave. He was voted democratically, as far as I remember, Israel before Benjamin Netanyahu, and after is when I lived here before 20 years ago. There were buses exploding in terror, and now there's none. So is he corrupt? Perhaps. Is this government corrupt? Most probably. They shouldn't get salaries that high when people don't have enough to eat. But this is part of the corruption of our society, and this we should demand. Not focus on a person, not focus on Donald Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu or X, Y, or Z, but focus on the problem at hand. But why do people focus on human beings? Why is it so easy to scapegoat and demonize human beings rather than to deal with the problem? I don't know, but it's a mechanism which is very faulty, because you need to deal with the issue at the topic. Trump is just, it's not Donald Trump, but it's the whole mechanism that voted him in. You cannot say that Donald Trump is to be blamed for the racism in America. The systematic racism in America is not Donald Trump's fault. What is at fault is that he receives all this support and yet continues. That needs to be examined. And it's not a Trump supporter or whatever, but it's a whole mechanism that supports this kind of behaviors. Same thing with Benjamin Netanyahu. You can't blame him and ignore The whole mechanism of politics, of politicians, and generations before him. There was so much discrimination and so much corruption in governments that were completely different political party, which is why Benjamin Netanyahu came into power and his party came into power in the first place. When I look at this ocean, there was a ship here that was drowned for political reasons and people died. Jewish people, Holocaust survivors, died because of a political disagreement, because they were not the right party. So when you look at that, and that happened to be the party of Benjamin Netanyahu, they were drowned here at sea, and we don't learn about it in high school. We don't speak about it because education is also manipulated by political agenda. Then you have to realize that this is not just Bibi Netanyahu and it's not just Donald Trump, but it's all mechanisms of people abusing power. And it's not him, it's all this mechanism of abusing power. And when we focus less on a person and more on the mechanisms, and when we try to change the system so that the people have more power and there's better division of wealth in our society, and we don't have certain people with a lot of power controlling everything and making decisions and deciding to earn a lot of money, there's not enough mechanism of controlling decisions to hike up the salaries for very wealthy people. There's too much gap between the poor and the wealthy in this country. And while the other party was supposed to be for socialism, that didn't work either because they did not implement those values either. So we have to really when you point a finger at someone, 4 fingers are pointing at you. That's what I grew up as. Always examine your motives. And I implemented it. Sadly, my siblings did not implement it. It's always easy to blame other people for your own actions. It's always easy to project your own evilness into other people. But while you do that, take a hard look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, is this the kind of person you want to be? Do you want to be a person who always blames other people and doesn't take responsibility? And what I want to tell you is, I definitely feel I made mistakes in my life, but the biggest mistake I ever made was not showing kindness to myself, not practicing the Buddhist mechanism of self-compassion. I forgot what it's called. Compassion towards myself, feeling love towards myself, and making sure that I'm okay. Not putting others always before myself. Not always the self-sacrificing female model which I grew up with. And afterwards that also backfires because you go crazy because you keep sacrificing and then you realize you're always falling short. So self-compassion is necessary in order to be able to be compassionate towards other people. You cannot feed the hungry when you don't feed yourself. So that's the metaphor. Theoretically, in fact. I'm feeling really upset today. I have a horrible rash in my arm that I got from working with kindergarten. And it's not just a physical rash. I've also encountered a psychological rash where whatever I do gets misconstrued. If I do yoga, it's not good. Kids are not interested, blah, 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 blah. This is not good. This is